Welcome to the Word Exchange for another episode. I'm your host, Miguel Chavez. I got my co-host, David Cano. We got Sergio Nunez back with us again, and we got a guest, Stuart Williams.
What's up, man?
How you doing, bro?
Good.
I've known Stuart for years. We're happy to have him on this episode of this podcast. He's going to share a little bit about his life. What's up, bro?
What's up, man? It's good to be on.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks.
I know you came up to me and said that you were a big fan, that you were watching some of our shows and that you wanted to be a part of it. And I got really excited because you were actually the first one that expressed that they wanted to be a part of it other than the core group, you know?
Yeah.
Sergio and Daniel have been, and David, they've all been like kind of our staple few, you know, that have been wanting to be a part of it. So to kind of see like other people taking interest, you, and then last week was Phil, and then we're getting people that are starting to hit us up and be like, hey, I wanna be a guest, you know. And that's the biggest thing with the podcast is getting people that are excited about it as well.
I just like the way that you guys approach things and you keep things, loose. You're not super structured about it because honestly, what people are dying for these days is connection, and they're dying for just having a real talk. You know what I mean? And that's to me, that is the only kind of format that I'm interested in anymore. If I'm listening to something, I'm not listening to, the news in this nice, neat little box
The
where they
fake
have
news.
where they have everything scripted. You know what I'm saying? I'm listening to people talking real and thinking things through.
What's new, man? What's going on in your life right now?
So what's interesting is a little bit about me. For those of whom don't know, I am a pastor's kid. We came out of this congregation. My dad had a burden to teach and preach, and so he went ahead and took a church in a little town in rural Arizona, and we learned a lot in those situations. As kids growing up away from the home church, sometimes it was a trial by fire, sometimes it was enjoyable. It had its moments, but I definitely learned a lot from it. And then when I turned 18, I moved to a little bit of a bigger town and started going to school because I had been a lifeguard in my teen years and said, you know what, I really like, the idea of going further in some kind of medical capacity. So I decided I was going to go ahead and go to EMT school. So I went and got my EMT certification.
How long did that take?
It's so for an EMT certification, you only have to go to a semester worth of school, but then you have to go and pass a state test. To get your actual certification, be registered and allowed to legally practice, in the state of Arizona. Being an EMT is a very gratifying job, but there's also some things about it that are not really known to the public as much. Typically it's not your typical 9 to 5, and so what you do is you're working either, some people work 12, some people work 24s. The agency I worked for, it was 24-hour shifts. So you live in a home that's not your own, you sleep in a bed that's not your own, and you're a 911. I was a 911 service ambulance, which just means you're there for any kind of emergency situation. And we're also in rural Arizona, so it's a area where you're covering 100 or so miles worth of medical needs, and houses are scattered here and there. There's no real mapping system. Even Google Maps doesn't get it right. So you're going off of paper maps that were written in the 80s and 90s sometimes to find where you need to be going whenever you get these addresses. And so it's real interesting, and it had its own unique challenges for sure. It was good experiences for me as a person, and a lot of personal growth happened. Some of it was by force, and some of it was was nice and easy going and learning. But I think for me, what was the most interesting part of it is we were the only we were covering an entire county, and in that county there's District 1 and District 2, and District 1 is covering that side, and District 2 is covering the other side. So you only have one EMT and medic on each side. So that's it. And you're about half an hour away from each other because of how far this county is spread out.
Yeah.
So with these two different
And where is this exactly?
So this is in southeastern Arizona. And it's hard. You can't really put. You can't. It's like you can't really put an exact location on it, because we would even spill over into New Mexico, because we were right on the New Mexico border, and we had an agreement because it was a very small area, and these two small towns type of thing, where if they needed help, we would mutually assist them and go across the border and help them. And so it's all volunteer if you want to be part of the fire department. But if you want to be in the EMS side of it, medical is considered, important. So we were actually paid for our job. And so we were in a firehouse with fire trucks.
Oh, wow.
But also ambulances. And so if there was ever a fire or structure fire and whatnot, our side of it wouldn't take care of that. Our side of it would take care of the medical, and then the volunteers would come grab the fire trucks and help out with that. So it was kind of an interesting situation too, because you're dealing with, kind of a limited amount of hands whenever you're on a scene, right? If you pull up to somebody, and the thing is so like unpacking the things that EMS deals with, right? So you show up on a scene, you don't have the support of a hospital behind you. You can call a doctor and say, look, this is what I'm seeing, but that's about it. And then they can give you orders and try to assist you over the phone. And then sometimes you have a cop on scene who's there, who you can have as an extra set of hands if you needed help. And sometimes you have family on scene that'll help, but a lot of times you don't. And so it's just you, your partner, figuring out how to either extricate this person from their home, because there's a lot of hoarding going on, because again, small community, and
have you seen
kind of
like the TV shows Hoarders? Like that?
Oh yeah, worse.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you seen those shows? The
Yeah,
Hoarders?
and then to want to live in a small town too, like it's usually those people who are like hermit crabs,
Yeah.
that want to be isolated, and there's something wrong with them. They're depressed. A lot of them deal with a lot of mental illnesses and stuff.
Yep.
So, so I mean, I could imagine it must be rough dealing with a lot of those people. How long did you do that?
I did it right around 5 years, which is about the average lifespan of an EMT. Most every agency in Arizona is owned by one company. EMTs are not paid much more than minimum wage. They're paid maybe $1 or $2 over. Whenever I was working, I was making $11.52 an hour.
Oh, that's right. Because you first have to be an EMT before you could become a paramedic, right?
Right, but what's even sadder is paramedics only make at that point $13 or $14 an hour. You're still and back then that was the minimum wage was $8 an hour.
Oh,
So you're
okay.
making $3-4 an hour over minimum wage.
Wow, that's
But you're taking on all this responsibility of all of the things you see, all the things you deal with, all of the medical liability. If someone wants to sue you, they can sue you just like they can sue a nurse or a doctor. My work week was a 48-hour shift. And so I'd stay there for 2 days, and whatever happened in that 2 days, sometimes we'd do what we called stand-up 24s, where it was just call after call after call after call. And you just got to make it work. You sleep and you eat as soon as you feel that you need to. If you feel like you need to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom right then, because you don't know when you're going to get your next call. And so it was kind of feast or famine a lot of times. Sometimes there would be no calls. Sometimes it just wouldn't stop. So now take that, and then you're making low wage, and then you're dealing with stressful situations. And the only way you're able to actually make money more than just making ends meet to, go on a vacation, to pay your bills off, to whatever you want to do, you have to work overtime. So I find myself in a place where I'm working 3-4 days away from home, living at this other place for that amount of time.
So you don't see your family at all for that amount of time?
Right. Yeah, you're yeah, because most people, since it's such a rural area, would travel to work from where they lived, which was usually an hour to an hour and a half away. And I found myself in a place where I was kind of a workaholic. It was kind of my fault, and I'd work extra shifts on a regular basis. Well, so that's kind of what leads up to why EMTs only last 5 years, because they burn out. The interesting thing is every day in EMS, you don't know what your work day is going to be like. So you have everything from, underage kids dying to, grandma and grandpa passing away to something as simple as, help, I've fallen and I can't get up, just like that old ad,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't understand whenever you do CPR, it's not like in the movies. So first off, yes, you do have bones and cartilage in your chest.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you're compressing 2 inches or more, which is what CPR requires, especially in the elderly, there is no elasticity in those bones. So you are breaking bones. So as you are pressing down to give them this life-saving effort, you are also hurting them. So you're literally hearing bones crunch while you're doing CPR a lot of times, especially in the elderly. And then even in middle-aged people, you'll hear it. And it's not to be graphic, but it's the reality of it. And then you're also dealing with, whenever you're done with your 20-30 minutes of CPR in this life-saving effort, and most of the time they don't live. And then you're looking at a deformed corpse because you caved in their chest. And so you almost feel as if you're causing more damage than good. But you know that in the end, that's the only effort in our human effort that we can make to try to help them, right? So a lot of times, again, imagine that, right? Then imagine, again, not like the movies, a dead body. Whenever you're walking in, an instant stench overwhelms you. The worst thing you could smell on earth.
What, like, compared to like what, like?
So
How could you-
let's say if you smelled,
Like an animal on the street, or is not even compared to that?
so an animal on the street usually has its own distinct,
Yeah.
musk to it or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But human death is just a different level because you have the knowledge, and the smell is just different. It's only
Oh.
describable once you smell it. That's how I have to say it, because in the end, whenever it comes right down to it, there's another level to it, because if you smell a dead animal, you know it's an animal.
Mm-hmm.
But if you smell a dead human, you're going to know that's a human because you're one too. So the difference is, I just can't describe
It's
it.
more
just,
like on a psychological level as well, right?
it's as well. It's a lot of it is psychological, yes, and then it just does have that different tinge because, once you understand what's happening in the body, you'll understand why that stench is involved, because you walk in, you smell that smell, you see someone laying there who, there's several different situations I could describe, but a lot of times it's, hey, I haven't seen so and so in so many days. Where could they be? And so they call out of concern, and we go do what's called a welfare check just to see if they're all right, because no one can get a hold of them. And sure enough, not to be disrespectful, but whenever you walk in, you smell the smell, you see them, and the first thing you're going to notice is that things aren't the right color. Tips of their fingers start to go black because of the lack of obvious oxygen, right? So imagine that. So it just doesn't seem human at that point. And then, as part of an effort to make sure, because we have to medically confirm that this person is dead. Mm-hmm. So the way that you have to medically confirm that is no pulse. So you go to feel a pulse. But as you're feeling the pulse, the skin sloughs off. Because what's happening in the body is as soon as the blood is no longer pumping, you have the blood and the water separate. And you have fluids going into every orifice and every part of the body that it shouldn't necessarily be in. And then you have the skin separating from other tissues because it's no longer being oxygenated. It's no longer being nurtured. So you go to feel the pulse, and the skin under your fingers just comes off whenever you move your finger. So then we have to check to see if there's any kind of heart activity, electrical activity whatsoever. So you have to put, the chest leads on to see if there's any measurement of electrical activity. And so you put those on, but they have to stick on, and the skin is weeping, right, with all kinds of fluids coming loose. The gut is going to be really engorged because, again, blood is pooling and causing a lot of issues. And so what you have is just a recipe of a human, but they no longer look human, right? They look more than vulnerable. They look distorted, right? And so it's very natural for the human mind to have that imprinted on them, and keep it there. Imagine a person hanging themselves. Hanging is also not like the movies. Almost more disturbing to me. They had everything going for them, right? They had the car, the girl, the house, the job. Sometimes it felt like there was no reason whatsoever that this should be happening. Yet you walk in and they hung themselves. And it's one of those things where you have these ligature marks, you have the body stiffening already, rigor mortis, right, setting in. You have the head being a completely different color than the rest of the body because of the extreme lack of blood flow. Even after death, there is some small amount of, perfusion going on in the lower body. So you have an extremely different colored head. Most times in my experience, it was purple. You have and they don't shut their eyes.
Right.
I don't know why the movies always does that too, but it's not a thing. They're not thinking about consciously trying to shut their eyes.
So mainly people die with their eyes open and their mouths open too, right?
Yes. And then you're seeing these very bloodshot eyes, like red, no white whatsoever. So just imagine, again, a human who's supposed to be human but doesn't look human any longer, right? So those are the kinds of things that EMS providers are dealing with on a daily basis. So a lot of times people don't associate PTSD with something that cops and EMTs and firefighters can have. It was traditionally, and it's been accepted as something that is military, right? They go out, they get in war, they have these situations that, granted, far more violent probably, and direct violence with themselves. No one's playing down the fact that the military has a hard time with PTSD. But there is a huge problem with PTSD going on in the EMS community as well as the police community that for years was not talked about. And then they started talking about it whenever people started taking their own lives in these communities. EMTs, medics, and cops. And only the last 5 to 10 years have we been willing to have an actual conversation. Maybe there's something to this, that these guys and girls are having these problems and they're not getting the help they need, and they're just killing themselves off because of the things that are going through their heads, right?
Wow.
So, and I had a partner who, I had several of them who were from the era of suck it up, right? You don't have a problem with the things that are going on in your head, you're going to be fine. That's the kind of things that they were told. And so they just sucked it up. But my generation of EMTs is starting to realize if we don't fix this problem, it's going to just continue to be a problem. And so take it back to me in the field. I've worked for about 5 years worth of time. Now comes the time for me to go back to school and focus on becoming a nurse because I decided I wanted to go the direction of being a nurse. So I get out of my EMT job and I'm just focusing on nursing school because it's very very demanding, about 60 to 80 hours a week worth of work. And so I decided job can't happen while school happens. So I get off the truck and I thought I was fine. Some people, PTSD, it hits after, soon after the fact, and some people it doesn't. What's happening is that memories are not converting from short-term to long-term memories. So long-term memories are those memories that are kind of more faint, like in your childhood, right? Where the image is kind of faded, right? But you remember the gist of what happened, right?
Mhm.
That's the way that our brain is intended. Because if we just had all of our memories at the forefront of our mind all of the time, we would have a very hard time with actually focusing on anything we are currently doing, right?
Right.
So with PTSD, what's happening is those memories are not converting to long-term memory. They're staying at the forefront of your mind. And so for me, I was fine the whole time I was dealing with these things. And I even had some people go, are you even human? Kind of looking at me weird. I guess it might've been the
Like,
crazy.
how are you able to deal with this?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the situation.
Right.
Right. And sometimes it would affect me minorly, but I'd, get over it in about a day. And I just thought, hey, I'm built for this. And then I get out of it and my body switches from fight or flight to feed and breed, right? That's another thing that happens, right? If you're in a war zone, they talk about this all the time, that fight or flight is active and ready. Your body's ready to go. And then the second that, the veteran...
You stop.
Yeah.
You calm down. You're back to normal life.
Yeah. Then that's whenever things started to replay for me.
They start to show up.
Right. And so...
Wow.
So all of those things started coming back to me, and it started to affect how I was able to function. I was not fun to be around. I was in a place where I had triggers of things, and I consider my case to be a mild case compared to some of the stories I've heard.
What were some of the triggers?
So I couldn't look at, I'd avoid putting on my belt in my closet, because I had someone hang themselves with a belt. And every time I'd look at my belt, it was the same type of belt. So I just stopped looking at it.
It would remind you of
Yep.
seeing that person.
Mm-hmm. I also had issues with, we had some pretty major traffic accidents sometimes. Anytime, believe it or not, it's kind of weird, kind of funny, but if I'd see a picture of a bear, couldn't do it.
Why?
Because, believe it or not, out in that rural area, I had to deal with a motorcycle versus a bear incident.
What do you mean?
Traveling down the highway. Yep.
A motorcycle hit a bear?
Yep. No joke.
Dang, dude.
So were you ever diagnosed with PTSD?
So what the interesting part of it is so my personality, I like to help people, but I do not like to admit when I need help. That's just part of my thing. I've always been that way. It's probably a very bad character flaw. So I did not go to a doctor about it. So the thing is I just kept having these symptoms, right, and these issues, and I wasn't really willing to talk about it, really willing to figure it out. And so imagine the people around me and how that's affecting them too. You know what I'm saying?
Did your wife know you were going through this kind of stuff?
So at first I wouldn't say anything, because mostly it was just a few items around the house I could avoid because they reminded me of something, or, that one spot in the road that reminded me of that accident I would see, and I'd just avoid that and I'd be good. I thought I was going to be fine. Suck it up. You're going to be okay. And then the dreams started, and I started having these dreams of me being the one hanging, or me being the patient, and things like that. So then I wasn't able to sleep well, right? So not only while I'm awake am I being assaulted by these things, but then I'm also sleeping and having these issues. And so it's just a mental battle constantly. Like, it never ended. And so in the end, it just broke me down slowly, day by day by day. And like I said, my experience is not half of the stories I've heard from those other people. And the only thing that saved me was being able to actually realize what it was. But it took me a while to actually admit it. Because in our area, they brought in a professional who all they do is deal with EMS people and talking about, ways that we can cope, how we can fix this, but also taking the time to describe what it was without calling it PTSD and then saying it was PTSD. So then it clicks, right? Because if someone would say, oh, you're having PTSD, dude, I'm like, no. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how I was. I was like, nah, not interested. But yeah. And so after having that happen, I realized, okay, probably is something having to do with that. Even though I thought I was invincible. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I thought I could handle it. No problem.
You have that macho man syndrome where you're like, oh, I can handle it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It sounds like it, though. I've been diagnosed with a few mental disabilities. I actually I'm on an antidepressant right now. I take Prozac.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm praying about that right now because I want to get off of it.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I don't it helps me mentally, but physically it makes me feel really tired all the time, makes me feel fatigued.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff that you're describing is because I suffer from severe OCD, severe panic attacks, anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And I think they all just kind of come together from a lot of the stuff that I experienced growing up. And I grew up in a very violent atmosphere. And so I grew up with a lot of anger, but also pushed by my family to be a certain way. So I felt that I needed to be a violent person and I needed to be scary. And I did a lot of things growing up that I didn't really want to do, but I felt like I needed to do them because that's what would make me a man. Things that I really didn't want to do, but I did them because for reputation purposes or for, because I felt like people are going to respect me if I do this. And if I don't do this, I'm not going to get the respect that I want. I did a lot of things where in my life, I felt like they were normal. Because it was all I knew at the time. But I remember sitting in a jail cell. I remember being locked up and I'm alone in a jail cell and everything is just coming to me. And I'm in there just stuck with my mind, with my thoughts. And I'm driving myself insane. I go to sleep and I'm having nightmares.
It's like hell on earth, man.
I wake up and I would hear, I wouldn't hear voices, but it was almost like my thoughts were really loud. And my mind would be racing. I would get intrusive thoughts. And as I got older, I got away from the people that I was around, that lifestyle. I wanted nothing to do with that. And that's actually what drew me to God. So I started coming to church when I was a teenager. I didn't grow up in church. My family wasn't saved or anything. I had an uncle that came to the door. And he was the black sheep of my family. And he was a drug addict and he was in and out of prison. And then in the early 90s, he got saved and God like radically transformed his life. So that was a big deal in my family to see the junkie, the black sheep in the family turn Christian and turn his life around. So he was constantly witnessing to me. And I remember I would come to the door and they had rap concerts, rock concerts and plays. And that always grabbed my attention, and I always thought to myself, if I ever go to a church, I'm going to go to that church because that's a cool church. Because my idea of church was, sitting in a Catholic church, listening to this boring, ritual.
Stand up, sit down.
and so that was different. And when I was locked up, because I was locked up from the age of 12 through 17, in and out, I would always hear the gospel preached in there. People from Victory Outreach, a lot of, ex-cons would go in there and give their testimony and trying to reach the kids and stuff. And that stuff always stood out to me. And I feel like God was always trying to reach out to me. My grandma was a Christian too, and some of the, like my mom was a backslider, but I never grew up in a Christian setting. I knew somewhat about the gospel and about Jesus, but it wasn't something that we had to practice, you know. But my entire life, I dealt with anxiety, and I didn't know that these were anxiety attacks, what I would get. I remember I would smoke weed sometimes, or I'd be on some other drug, and I'd feel like this overwhelming feeling of paranoia and fear that would come over me. And I didn't know what I was afraid of, but I was just really scared. And so I stopped smoking weed because of that. But then this feeling later on started to come without me even smoking weed.
Yep.
And I'm like, what the heck? You know, like it was just like this overwhelming fear that would like alter my conscience and make me afraid and make me want to like curl up into a ball. And I was too scared, like you said. I was afraid to tell people what I was feeling, not because I wanted to look tough, but because I was afraid that people were going to think I was crazy, because I was starting to believe that. Like, I'm going crazy. I'm losing my mind, and people are going to think I'm crazy. So when people would call me crazy or say something to that effect, it would trigger something in my head. I was very sensitive because I really believed that, but I would try to hide that from people. I didn't want people to think that I was crazy. But depression was another one. Like I would go through my stages, and OCD. I remember that started with me when I was about 10 years old, where I started to do little ritual things. Like, for example, the way it started for me is I would, in my mind, picture like there was this spray that I had, and I would spray my hands to disinfect myself from something that, I know this sounds crazy, but from, like, let's say, for example, if I touch this and it's dirty, or I feel like because I touched this, something bad's going to happen to me. So now I got to pull out my imaginary spray and spray my hands. And I used to do that when I was a kid. But I didn't know. I mean, I knew that wasn't real, but I had to do it to give myself peace of mind. And then with the doors, I would shut a door, open it, and I would stay there for a long time. I would have to keep on opening the door and shutting it until it felt right. The locks, the light switches. Sometimes I would walk out of my house and I didn't like the way that felt, so I had to walk back inside and then walk back out, and it started to become very like irritating, and I didn't know what this was. My family would make fun of me, my brothers, my sisters. I would do this thing with my hands too, where I still kind of do it sometimes, but I think I've mastered it now, and God's helped me out a lot too. But where I would do this because I felt like I would be like taking all the negative energy away from me, and by me doing these rituals, nothing bad was going to happen to me. But if I didn't do this, the anxiety would start to creep in. If I don't do this, it's possibly that I might get into a car accident, or if I don't do this, my mom's going to die.
Yeah, and a lot of times they've found that whenever people have an issue where they have no control in their life over certain things, so like what you were describing about how you were doing things you didn't really want to do, it was a very violent situation at home. A lot of times OCD becomes an outward portrayal of something that you can control. So you start to feel like, okay, I have to do these things, you know what I mean, to have some form of control in my life. And that sounds a lot like what you were going through, because that's what ends up happening a lot of times is you'll see some kind of trauma in the history of a person with OCD. I work in behavioral health now, and I'm learning these things. And if you see that major trauma happen, and then they start to have these, major OCDs, one of them depression, anxiety, the whole 9 yards, because they feel like they're out of control.
I know you mentioned there was a TV show of a guy with the door.
So that I never knew what I had. I was never diagnosed. I never saw a doctor. And I think I was about maybe, I want to say maybe like 18 or 19. And there was this show on MTV called MTV True Life. And this was, I want to say maybe like 2004. And I remember watching this show, and there were people. This was like when reality shows first started to become big, and there were reality shows of these people who had OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and they're doing all these things that I'm doing, and they're explaining the things that I could only understand in my head. I was never able to explain this to anyone.
To express it?
I
you
was
mean?
never able to express it. Yeah, I didn't know how. I didn't know what I had. I thought I was completely different, so I kind of hid that. And because my mom and my brothers and everybody would make fun of me, and like I would even hear my family say sometimes, like, yeah, well, David's a little off. He does some weird things, and he's a little crazy. And those things, like, I would hear those things, and they would bother me, and I wanted to be normal so bad, but I couldn't. But I remember watching the show, and I was like, that's what I have. That's exactly what I have. And I felt like I had finally found the answer. Like I have OCD. So then finally, I went to go see a psychiatrist on my own. I didn't tell anyone. I went to this place called La Frontera, and I just went in there and I had a psychiatric evaluation, and I told them everything, and that's when they diagnosed me with anxiety and OCD. And as I started getting older, then I began to experience panic attacks. I'd be sitting down, and out of nowhere, my heart would just jump, start racing. And I thought there was something wrong with my heart for the longest time. I went to go see a cardiologist. They cleared me. An electrophysiologist, they cleared me. And finally, my doctor told me, she said, I think what you have is a little more psychological.
They say Google is saying that 200,000 cases per year for OCD. So this is something that a lot of people are dealing with. That's just in the U.S. alone. Yeah. So
mental health is a crisis.
This is a big issue,
Well, right now, too, I think now more than ever, you're starting to see it a lot more. I meet a lot of people, and people reach out to me now. Hey, I struggle with anxiety. I struggle because I'm open about it. Now that I'm a Christian and I share my testimony, and I get people, DMing me and stuff, asking me for help. And in a way, that's good. I'm glad that I can do that, and I feel strong enough to be able to help people with those problems now, because when I was struggling with that, I had nobody.
Do you feel like, and this goes for both of you, because, I'm looking at you now, and if you suffer from PTSD, I would not be able to tell. And same with you. I didn't know you had OCDs until you brought them up, or anxiety, but you share these stories, and it's almost like, when the pastor says, hey, look out for others, because then your problems become nothing. If you're focused on other people's problems, you begin to forget your own and just help people. That's what they preach a lot, is to motivate people to help others. So do you feel like when you share what you've gone through to help somebody else, or you help them with their issues, it kind of alleviates yours, or how does it feel?
It definitely does feel like I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one. I'm not alone. Because feeling alone in that, dude, is a crappy feeling, dude. Like feeling like you're the only one, you're the outcast.
And the devil lies to you and makes it worse.
Yeah, dude, for the long, I went through my seasons where I was suicidal. I wanted to kill myself because I didn't want to deal with my mental illness. It was that bad that I would think to myself, if I can't live a normal life, I don't want to live like this.
Yeah. It got to the point, it didn't get to that point for me with the whole PTSD thing, but it got to the point where it was affecting my work. I was helping to teach EMTs as well as working as an EMT, and then I quit the job as working as an EMT and kept the teaching job as a part-time job while I was going to school. And I was not enthusiastic. I was not preparing the way I should be for my lectures, and I had taught in the past, and so there was issues there. And the program director says, like, look, what's going on? Like, this isn't the same, as I was before. And I I was just like, what are you talking about? I didn't see it because my brain is so worried about these thoughts and it's just focusing on all these other things that I'm too mentally exhausted to even realize what's going on, that I'm not doing my job right, you know? And so basically it got to but him bringing that up to me made me start to realize, okay, something is wrong, you know? And so then I actually start to talk with, you know, some other people who've experienced it. Like, hey, was, you know, bouncing ideas off them saying, hey, is this what was going on with you?
To see if that is what you're going through.
Other people in the EMS community who are willing to talk about it now because we had created a space where we could eventually actually start to talk about it. And then I started to realize, yep, this is PTSD. And I had to come to grips with that. And that took me a bit of time to do. But whenever I did.
How long did you suffer with it for?
It was a period of about 3 months. Where I didn't know exactly what was going on. And then towards the end of that, the things that, so I started doing research when I started to realize, okay, this is PTSD. You know what I mean? And so I start to look at a lot of different things. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that they say can help. One of them is EMDR. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. It's eye movement reprogramming and desensitization. And so one of the things is the way it's described, at least from what I learned of it, and I'm not an expert in it, but basically either someone, you know, takes their finger and has you focus on it, go back and forth, and rapidly blink while recounting verbally an event, a traumatic event. Or they just have you blink and stare at a spot on the wall or something like that. But what does that sound like to you?
Like meditation. Almost.
It sounds like hypnotism, right?
Oh, hypnotism, yeah.
Yeah,
That
that's what
it sounded something new agey.
Yeah,
that's what it sounded like.
Right, and so and I respect it if other people wanted to try it, but to me, you know, from a spiritual perspective, I'm looking at this and I'm going like, this doesn't sound right.
Well, yeah, that's the thing too with me, because when I would go see psychiatrists and I would talk to a counselor, they would tell me, if you want to try meditation, and I did try that stuff because I got very deep into the new age before I rededicated my life to Jesus this last time, and it did work, but
you're opening these doors.
You are, and that's what I was going to ask you. Do you feel like a lot of these mental illnesses are spiritual, like they could be spiritually related? Because I know that as far as my PTSD goes, for me, it was more like condemnation. I remember sitting in my bathtub right now one time. I was so, I was having a panic attack. And I'm sorry, dude, it's not easy to talk about this stuff.
It's all good.
But I was having a panic attack. I was trying to relax, so I went into my bathtub, and I'm laying there, and these like thoughts are coming into my head, memories that keep playing like on repeat over and over and over and over, and I don't want them there, but it's like they're there staring at me. And it's just there continuously, and it won't go away. And it's to the point where I can't focus on anything else but that. And I'm stuck in that. And it's like I hear my kids in the background like, Dad. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, I can't even take care of my own kids, you know? And then I start thinking, like, I don't want to live. Like, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to live like this. But I remember praying, and I had to step out in faith. And I said, God, I need your help. My mind is just tormented. And I remember one time I was listening to this sermon by Pastor David Wilkerson. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
And I was listening to the sermon, and I was praying, and I was in my room in the dark. I was praying, and I said, God, why haven't you took this away from me? I can't. I just want to be able to shut my eyes and go to sleep and just have my mind blank. You know, my mind is constantly just racing. Like, please give me peace. And I got so frustrated, and I said, why, God? Like, why won't you just let me take this away so I can go to sleep? and Pastor David Wilkerson was preaching. You know, I had it on my phone, and he said, sometimes God allows you to go through certain things because he's shaping you and because he has a destiny for you. And you might be asking, why, God, why am I still going through this? And he's like, it's because God is trying to invoke faith in you. And I remember I heard that, and after I heard that, like, that brought me peace. You know,
That's good.
and there was right around that same time, I can't remember if it was the same night or the following night, but do you guys know who Derek Prince is?
No, I don't.
He preaches a lot on like spiritual warfare. So I ran across this video that it said casting out demons of depression and anxiety. And so I clicked on it, and he was preaching on how anxiety and depression, how these are demons that are torturing you. And so I'm listening to him preach on this, and he said, I'm going to lead you into a prayer. He says, and we're gonna renounce these spirits out of your life. And so when he said that, I started shaking, and I started feeling like afraid. And I felt like I didn't hear a voice, but I felt like something told me, stop watching this. And I felt that like really strong, and I got scared, and I was holding my phone like this, and I'm shaking. And he's like, just repeat after me. And I started repeating after the prayer, and I started praying. And right after that, I felt this peace come over me, and through the corner of my eye, I saw like this red shadow run out of my room. And it was right around that time, and they're witnesses of this. I called them and a few of the brothers to come over to my house and pray for my house because a lot of weird stuff was happening there. I don't know if you watched the last podcast where I talked about the thing that was trying to get inside of me and then jumped to my brother. Things were getting knocked over at my house. So after a while, I'm like, okay, this isn't all in my head. Like, this is real if my family's experiencing this too. My kids, you know, my kids would tell me, Dad, I'm scared. That we would hear noises, and we would go, and there was this one time where we heard this loud noise in the room, and we went in there, and all the stuff that was on my daughter's dresser was on the floor. Like if someone knocked it down like that. So I remember I fasted for 3 days. After the third day of fasting, I remember I was dozing off on my couch, and I felt something jump out of me. And after that, I felt so much peace, and I knew that that night a demon left me. So I believe that I still struggle with certain things like anxiety and depression, but not to the point where I was before, where I really wanted to take my life.
Where you had no hope.
Where I had no hope.
Now you have hope.
Yeah. And since I started coming to church, like I feel, and I rededicated my life to God, and I got closer to God. I feel so much better.
That's awesome, man.
So how about for you? I know PTSD is different, but in some ways it's similar.
Yeah.
You know?
So here's the thing. So I had to rectify, right? So I obviously, spiritual background as well as understanding, that no matter what we do, even if it is in the physical world, it is affecting our mind, right? And so I even had an instance of dealing with meditation, but not like the EMDR was an option, right? Like I was talking about, and then I was like, that's too weird for me. But then the idea of just sitting and clearing your mind, right? Not. I was like, I'll do without all the mysticism and the weirdness and this and that with the meditation. I'll just sit there and deep breathe and clear my mind, right? But the problem with that also is, all of these mindfulness apps, every single one of them still tell you, clear your mind and let your thoughts come freely. But that's totally opposite of what the Bible says, right? Because the biblical principle is you take every thought captive.
Yeah, you bring every thought to captivity.
And you bring it into the obedience of Christ.
And put on the whole armor of God, because the devil walks around like a roaring lion,
right,
seeking whom he may devour. So the Bible never says anything about clearing your mind.
Exactly. And so I tried that for a bit, and it does. It brings a temporary type of peace. But at the same time, what it does is it's embracing oblivion. It's embracing that nothing matters. It's okay. You're all right. Instead of everything matters, right? Because if it either all matters or it doesn't at all.
Mm.
And the Bible teaches us that everything matters. And so that to me was where I had to come to a place where inside I there was something checking me going, that's not right. You know what I mean? So I gave that up, but I still had the plaguing thoughts. I still had the problems. And I found, honestly, the thing is so simple, but it's the most therapeutic thing that I did was just naming what I was thinking. I know it sounds really weird, but healthcare professionals are not allowed to talk about details. As you notice in our conversation, I made sure I can't tell you where exactly these things happened. I can't tell you, all the major details, because that's protected information of the patient, right? So we don't talk about this stuff. And then you have on top of it my personality, which is like, no, I'm fine. It's going to be okay. I help others. I don't need help, right? And so you have all that put together. Me sitting there talking to God about it and just saying every detail of the things that I was seeing and I was dealing with, as well as talking to, you can talk with people who are directly involved in the care. So finding somebody, if it was a situation, and talking with them about it, and debriefing myself basically. And basically by putting it in words, the power of the spoken word itself, and saying exactly as much detail as possible of what was going on in my head, it gave it less power by simply naming it. And over time, what for me, it converted those short-term memories that were stuck at the front of my brain into the ability to, okay, they're there and they're still there, but I don't have to think about them all
They're not
the time.
tormenting you anymore.
Exactly. And so that, of course, bathed with a lot of prayer and all the other things, because I am a very, spiritual person, obviously. All that combination, and there is truth in the word of, time heals wounds. As long as you are doing the right things and you're dressing the wound properly and all of that it began to heal my mental wounds. So I never got to the place where you were saying how you felt, suicidal and whatnot. But just feeling what I felt, I can only imagine how much worse that must have felt. You know what I mean?
What scripture comes to my mind was when you pray, like ask God to renew your mind. That could be a weakness for us, as humans and sinful nature and falling short. So he says, hey, change by the renewing of your mind. Ask God to renew your mind daily.
Right.
So you can change the way you think, change the way you operate. And I think that's something that maybe some people overlook. You know?
And that's the thing to me, man. So the thing that finally helped me rectify everything and get on the right track with this was being able to look at it scripturally, because a lot of times the church world in the past has neglected mental health and not talked about it, because it's assumed and again, this is just some Christians where it was just assumed that when you're saved, those things don't happen to you. And that's the thing is like in the end here, what I really do believe, like what you were saying with that sermon, it really clicks where, God allows you to go through it, because honestly, I had an opinion similar to that, where it was like, this can't be happening to me. I'm saved. I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like I'm spiritually intact, but yet it did. And I really think it comes down to, we are all sinners and have fallen short, right? And our minds were never designed to have to put up with death and destruction and terrible, horrible, heinous things that humans do to each other. And we were never meant to decay and die ourselves, because we were meant to live in the garden at peace with God for the rest of our existence, which would have been eternal if we would have not sinned. And so our minds are not designed to deal with the things that we deal with. And so why can't we have mental health problems? We can. That's the answer. We can. And I became okay with it. I became okay with the fact that this is a problem for me. Not that I was okay that I was having the problem, but okay with it to where I was like, okay,
You need to realize.
I realized.
It is, and that's pretty awesome that you said that, man, because that's not talked about a lot, and maybe there are people in church that are Christian that are scared to say, you know what, I am dealing with this mental health issue.
In the end, that's the whole reason I'm willing to do this, is because I'm not a very public person. I'm not in touch with my emotions very much. I've never been that. It's just not how I am. So for me to do this is not about me. It has everything to do with, because I know that there's a lot of people who've experienced far worse. I mean, I just heard some stories over here that are insane to me. But what it really comes down to is all of these things that result from that sin nature are valid. You need to know that those mind battles you're going through, the anxiety, the depression, all of those things are valid. And the reason that they are valid is because you are a sinner and you've fallen short. And you need to be okay with that. And you need to realize that I have to name this demon to get it out, right? And just like what you were saying, sometimes those demons can influence us, right? And I believe I was in the point where, like, there's different stages of, oppression, possession, all those different things, right? And I believe I was at the stage of being oppressed. And if
I do believe it is demonic oppression.
Right, and I was being oppressed, but it was because of the things that had happened in my life.
That's so true.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
finish.
and so I had the choice of whether or not I was going to open the door and allow that oppression to become a possession, or to allow it to progress any further. And I believe, because I figured it out, it took me a bit, and I went through and did some things probably shouldn't have done in the process of trying to figure it out.
Right.
But I did get it figured out that it didn't become any worse.
God
because
has set you free.
Yes, yeah, and I can honestly say I sleep like a baby again. I have no problems with sleep.
So there's hope.
There is.
Yeah, because a lot of the things that I was doing at the time when I was experiencing panic attacks and like severe panic attacks, severe OCD, there were during times in my life when I was doing some things that in the back of my mind I knew were really bad. For example, I'll share one where and I'm not proud of this, but I've always had a problem with infidelity. I've never been married, but I've been in long relationships. I've lived with 2 different women for a long time. But I would also sleep around with married women. And a lot of this stuff that I was doing, it was very dark. But at the time, I didn't look at it like that because I was satisfying the lust of my flesh. But in the back of my mind, my conscience was eating away at me. And I think that was part of my anxiety, my panic attacks, where I knew I wasn't right. Something wasn't right.
And you were also a backslider. So that was probably adding to that too.
And so, no, yeah, definitely. Well, I had gotten to a point too where I had stopped believing in God. Well, not God, but in Christianity, you know.
Wow.
And as far as the whole New Age thing, like I became more spiritual. But even then, I remember God was always reaching out. But anyway, my point is that it was always like how I described to you my PTSD. It was condemnation. I was like condemning myself. Well, not really me, but it was like my mind telling me like, look at what you did. You're a dark person. You don't deserve to live. That's how I felt. And now that I look back, I feel like these were demonic entities that were really trying to get me to kill myself. Because even in things that when God has used me in ways that I never even imagined that God could use me, you know, doing the interpretation in the church when people speak in tongues and someone gives the interpretation, I used to think that was staged. And I remember when I got saved this time, I've been saved a little over a year now, or like a year and a half. But I remember I heard that and I'm thinking in my head, like I can't believe people buy this crap. Like I'm already saved, but I still don't believe in that.
Right.
I'm like, Pete, this is so staged. And I remember I got convicted. And I said, God, I don't want to blaspheme against the Holy Spirit. I said, if this is real and if this is true, I need you to reveal this to me. And here I am
Yeah.
interpreting
Yeah.
tongues in the church.
Amen.
God has a
Praise
sense of
God.
humor, dude.
You know what I mean?
And that's the thing is a lot of times, like, some people might see this and think, okay, he's a medical professional and yet he still thinks that the spiritual element exists. But the fact is that if you look at a human as a whole, why did he have a conscience, about those things? And it's because we do have that spiritual element. We know there's been people who have not ever been exposed to Christianity, and yet they know a difference between right and wrong, and they can
That's
divide
what I was
that.
gonna say. Like,
Right.
if anyone is really honest with themselves, you can lie to people to their face, but when you're alone in your room watching this on YouTube, be honest with yourself. You know the difference. You know when you're sinning. You know when you're disobeying. You know when you're doing something wrong,
Yeah.
because God has given you that inside as a person. Saying,
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I was going to say, Miguel. Because in the end, it all comes down to we were built for a reason, and every time that we deviate from that purpose is whenever we start running into problems. And that's the thing. For me, it wasn't so much condemnation. It was more with the PTSD. I think my mind was going, I couldn't save them. I couldn't do that because, again, I'm a person who likes to be in control, right? I like to know that I'm helping. I am doing something. I have purpose. I have meaning, right? That's how I was raised. But I thought in myself that I could also, control and help with my patients. In some situations, it was beyond my control. And I think that's part of what brought it back to the forefront of my mind once I was all, said and done. For me personally, it was, you know what I mean? But either way, all of these mental battles and struggles have to be talked about more because no matter what is the cause of it, it can always turn into an open door for some type of oppression for these spirits, to be involved in the situation. And some people are going to think I'm crazy about it, but I've had enough spiritual experiences to know that there is a spiritual world, and that's just all there is to it.
Me being in the military, I was in the Air Force for about 8.5 years. I've never experienced anything, but I've known people that have. People that were older than me that, actually were in the Gulf War, telling me about people that they knew from wars before, their forefathers and all that, and how real PTSD can be. And, I had an uncle who was a Marine, and he was in the Gulf War, and he would tell me, yeah, I went over there, mijo, and, you do what you have to do, you do your job, but at the end of it all, physically you're out of there, but mentally you bring a lot of that back with you. He's like, I never went through anything really crazy, but still, just having, even just the reason why you're out there, it's baffling. He's like, we're out here, why? Because some guy decides to invade another smaller country and, oppress these people. Like, you hear about wars, he's like, you're in the military, you have to serve. You hear about these things that have happened, you read them in history. When you're out there actually dealing with something, and you're at the front line of it all, it's like, man, it's a whole 180. First, 1 minute you're in San Diego, and you're just living your life, hearing about what's going to happen. Next you know, you're being deployed to the area where it's happening. And yeah, he was been shot at, had bombs going off around him, but he's alive and well and everything. But just to hear that, and then hearing about other stories, and how before, PTSD wasn't really an issue. Well, it wasn't an issue that was brought up, but people were going through it. And, talking about what we were talking about, people have taken their lives, people, because they didn't know how to deal with it. For them, it was too much. They couldn't handle it to the point where it's like, you know what? It's better just to end it all so I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason I think that I even wanted to do this at all, was just because by just talking about it, it brings it out into the light, and everybody has to deal with it and start to realize, okay, look, this is something even within the church world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that we're all susceptible to. We're all human beings. We're all flawed, and you know, as soon as we can come to the point where yes, we do have a problem. The second knowing is half the battle.
I wonder, you know, thinking about it now, is your sin could probably cause PTSD from sin,
Oh yeah.
from your past
Oh
life.
well, I'm
Yeah.
perfect example of that.
You see what I
bro.
mean? So
Yeah.
you don't have to be an EMT. You don't have to be. I'm not
Oh, yeah.
downplaying any of it. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, to go off of what you're saying, is being a sinner and becoming a Christian. You carry that luggage with you, man. You know,
Yeah.
you those habits, those, and a lot of times I've heard it said where, you know, you do the crime, you got to do the time.
Mm-hmm.
You destroy your life. You know, there's things that you've done that you still have to deal with as you grow and move forward and become a better Christian. So, you know, I want to thank you for coming and sharing.
Yeah, man.
I know that because I've lost 2 people to suicide. One was my cousin, who was my best friend, and right around that time, I was going through a very ugly time in my life, and I didn't want to talk to anyone. He was living with me, and he was really depressed, and he kept telling me, I need to talk to you about something, and I kept putting it off. We'll talk later. I don't have time right now. And shortly after that, he took his life. And I felt horrible because I didn't know what he wanted to talk to me about, but I knew he was depressed. To this day, we don't know if it was an accident or he really meant to kill himself, because the people that he was with that night, they were saying that he was drunk and he kept messing around and putting the gun to his head and then taking it, you know, and putting it back down and doing it again. So, but he was very depressed. And that stayed with me for the longest time. I could have done something, but I didn't. Then this year, one of my friends, George, and I know I told both of you guys about this, he dealt with anxiety and depression, and he was a new ager starting to convert into Christianity. So I would have long conversations with this guy at night because I could relate to him. And he would tell me, I'm going through this, I can't sleep, and what do I do? He had all these questions about the Bible, and I would sit there and talk to this guy for a long time to try to help him out. But we went a little while without talking, and he had been trying to reach out right around the time when the whole pandemic happened. And he was asking me, like, how do you feel about this pandemic? Man, we got to get together. He said, I really want to sit down and talk to you. He said, I got a lot to tell you. We need to catch up. And I'm really close friends with the mother of his child and a lot of his friends. Like, we're all part of the same group of friends. Anyway, so he... one of my other friends had called me and he said, hey, have you talked to George lately? And I said, no. He said, dude, you need to call him, bro. He said, because you're the only person that I know. I'm the only Christian out of them, you know. He's like, you're the only godly person that I know that can talk to him and that he'll listen to. He said, dude, he's not doing well. He said, you need to call him. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to call him. During that time, I was caught up in something negative, already saved, but in just some negative drama that I shouldn't have been a part of. And I didn't call him because I was so entertained by this nonsense that I shouldn't have been giving my attention to. And I remember the first day that I started this new job with the state, during training, I'm sitting there and I got a text message and I opened it and it was from my friend Freddie, and he said, George took his life this morning. And I was like, man, that really messed me up. Now that was the second time, dude. Second time that I felt like I could have done something, bro. And I didn't. Now, I know this person, and she's a girl, and that's all I'm going to say. But she struggles with severe anxiety, OCD, PTSD, and she's so bad to the point where she can't leave her house. She can't even have a job. She's receiving disability. And she's a young girl, and like young, beautiful, smart, but this mental thing won't, like, she's trapped. She can't leave her house because she's afraid she's going to have a panic attack. One time she sent me a message and she said, look at how bad this has got. and she sent me a picture of these like pieces of clothes that were like torn, and I didn't understand what she was trying to say to me. And finally I got it out of her, and she said, I wanted to take a shower, but I haven't been able to take a shower because I haven't been able to take my clothes off without doing all these rituals. I can't take off my clothes, so I had to use grab a pair of scissors and cut my clothes off just so that I can get in the shower. Now that might sound crazy to some people. A lot of people might not understand this. People that don't battle with these types of things, that's torment, dude, and it's hell. And I wanted to help this girl so bad. I ended up sharing my whole testimony with her, like details. And I didn't realize that because of her condition, I should have held back with some things. Because I know that when you suffer from anxiety, you can't watch horror movies. You got to be careful with, because certain things trigger you. You know, they trigger a panic attack. And so, and I know this, but I got so caught up with wanting to share my testimony with her that I freaked her out. And then she's like, I can't talk to you for a while. It's just the conversation we had gave me really bad anxiety. So now I'm worried that because she was telling me I want a normal life, but I can't have a normal life. I could never get married. She said I could never have kids. She said because I can't perform well as a normal human being, and I don't want to live like this. And so I started to think like, oh man, like here's another one. She's going to start getting really depressed and she's going to end up killing herself. So keep this person in prayer.
Okay.
I've been trying really hard to help her out because I don't want that to happen again, dude, where I feel like there's somebody that I could have helped and I didn't. But there's a lot of people out there dealing with stuff like this.
Yeah.
Too many, dude. And I want people to know, people that are watching, that there is hope.
And in general, I 100% agree, man. See, the thing is like, even if since we've had this whole COVID pandemic go on, there's been a marked increase in suicide, right? And it's because people for the first time have to be alone with their thoughts and sit in quarantine. And whenever they're alone with their thoughts, they're no longer being distracted from them. And that is causing them to have these crises, because there's a crisis of meaning in the modern world, right? There's a lot of times that people either go through traumatic events or have things that happen to them, and there's some kind of, either a stigma, either they have a macho mentality, or they have a, they don't know where to turn to for help. And we have to be able to be there to help, and just, if nothing else, be an ear to hear. Because I don't know about you, man, but whenever I was able to finally start talking about it, even though it was hard for me, it was liberating at the same time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It no longer has the same power over you whenever you say, this is what happened to me, and I was able to overcome it. And that, to me, is what needs to start happening more and more in the church world.
It's like people having different lifestyles when they want to build up a testimony. Some people feel, well, I feel like I haven't gone through enough to have a testimony because they grew up in church and they never experienced, the sin that other people experience.
That's a thing.
That is a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
People battle
Take
with
it from
that.
a PK.
People battle with that all the time. That's the reason,
crazy, dude.
That's the reason I went through the crap I went through in my life. I grew up as a church kid. I grew up, before I got saved and stuff, I think I grew up as a well-mannered kid. I was in the world, but still my dad being a backslider, and my mom being also, they told me what was right and what was wrong. But what happened towards the end of middle school and then high school and college years, even still being in church, I was like, well, I don't know what that's like. I don't know what other people go through. I need to experience it for myself. And I did. But of course, you look at it now, it's one of the stupidest things I've ever could have done.
It is, and the devil's a liar, bro, because in the world, when you grow up in the world and you don't grow more, and I want to say more like in a conservative atmosphere, but non-Christian, the world frowns upon people like the people who converted to Christianity, who at one point were jacked up drug addicts. And I remember I used to say that too. Church is nothing but a bunch of ex-drug addicts, people who were just really jacked up mentally and they needed help. And they found this, and this is what helped them. And this is what straightened them out. But this person, on the other hand, he doesn't need church because he's level-minded. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that's a lie from the devil to the like pastors' kids and, the church kids and stuff that grow up in church, to put it in their head that, no, you have to be wicked and evil first before coming to God. So it's like you're not validated yet. You got to go out and do some stuff and then come back with a testimony.
Right.
And that's a lie from the devil, bro.
Yeah.
There's people out there, bro, like doctors and lawyers and people that grew up really good, bro. They grew up really good and they never really had to struggle. And a lot of these people feel like they're too intelligent to believe that there's a God. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of these people will never even come to know Jesus.
True. Very true.
So consider it a blessing, bro.
It is a blessing.
You know what I mean? I mean, I would kill, bro, to have good parents that were Christian. My dad is an alcoholic. He's a Jehovah's Witness. He hates the fact that I'm a Christian and I come to this church, and he always wants to have a religious debate with me while he's dying from cirrhosis. My mom is saved now, but growing up, my mom, for better words, she just wasn't a good example. We'll just say that.
I hear you.
So the only parents I had were my grandparents, but they were really old. And my grandfather died when I was 16. And shortly after that, my grandma lost her mind to dementia. So I really wish that I would have had a dad and a mom that I could go to and vent to and that I could fall back on even, like if I'm in trouble, like, no, dude, right now, if I don't work and I don't take care of stuff and I'm a single father, I don't know if you know, everything will fall apart, dude. I have nobody to fall back on. I can't say, hey, mom, can I come stay at your house? Or, hey, dad, can I come sleep in your travel trailer? I don't have that luxury, bro. But that's a blessing, and I want to be that for my kids.
Exactly.
Change the generation. Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's a lie from the devil, bro. Like, you don't need to go out and jack yourself up just so that you can come back and say, oh, look at what God saved me from. No, count your blessings. Hey, look, man, God is so good. He blessed my family. He's blessed me. And I grew up in this congregation. I thank God that I never had to go through this or this, Anyway, I just, to me, it's awesome, bro. I feel like sometimes when I look at church kids or pastors' kids, I feel like they're clean, bro.
No,
like
exactly.
They look innocent, and I look at myself like I'm like this dirty piece of rag.
No, and I hear you, and I had to learn the hard way because I had that luxury, and I thought I had to go and experience these things because I was missing out when I wasn't missing out on anything at all, but nothing but sin, and I allowed the devil to just run me to the ground. But by the grace of God, I'm back here, serving God. I'm here with you guys. We're talking. For anybody that's listening, hopefully this is a big influence, a big encouragement in your life. And if you are a pastor's kid out there and you kind of think, oh, my life seems pretty dull, not at all. It's the direct opposite. Your life is complete growing up in the things of God and the will of God. Because with God, with Jesus, you have everything. You're not missing out on anything. Anything that you can miss out on is right in your personal walk with God, and all in between all the walls of your church and the people that you fellowship with, and that that you congregate with. Don't ever think that you're missing out on anything because you hear about all the fun things that your friends or family did with girls, alcohol, drugs, you name it. Sin is sin, and once you experience it, you get a taste for it, and you think it only gets better, but it only gets worse. And I'm telling you, if you're a pastor's kid or you're growing up in the things of God, just run that course. You're going to see the blessing in the long run.
Well, you guys, we're out of time. This was a great episode. I want to thank you again, Stuart, for coming. We hope to have you again.
It's a pleasure.
Just hang out. David, thanks for sharing those intimate moments that you've dealt with. with your OCD, your mental illness, the PTSD that you dealt with. If you're out there and you're watching this, reach out in the comments if you want us to pray for you. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Help the channel grow. If you want to share this with somebody, go right ahead. Drop a like.
Do you think we should say a prayer real quick, like live, if someone's watching?
You want to lead them in a prayer?
Yeah, maybe God could touch them right now. Yeah, I really feel moved by God. If someone's watching and you're struggling with some sort of mental disorder, depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever it is, I just want you to know that there's hope. And if God could help someone who was as jacked up as me, he could definitely help you. If God brought Stuart out of his PTSD, he can definitely help you. So I just want to pray right now and believe that God's going to touch you. So, Father God, we come before you right now, my God, in the name of Jesus, Lord. I just want to thank you, my God, for this time, my God, that you have allowed us, my God, to come together, my God, and share these stories, my God, but all for the purpose, my God, of your glory, my God. Father, I pray right now, my God, by the power of your Holy Spirit, my God, that you touch anyone, my God, that is watching this video right now, my God, that might be struggling with suicidal thoughts, my God. Anyone that might be struggling with severe anxiety, with depression, my God, with PTSD, my God, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, my God, any of these mental illnesses, my God, I pray right now, my God, in the name of Jesus, that you grab a hold of your children, my God, and that you begin to tug at the door of their heart, my God, and begin to pull them towards you, my God, and show them, my God, show them that there is hope in you, my God, draw them towards you, my God, and allow them to be a testimony, my God, for your glory, my God. We thank you, my God, and we give you all the praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 All right, peace out, guys. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks, guys. That was fun.
That was good, bro.
Good stuff.
Good job, bro.